Hi, and welcome to a special Pesach edition of Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen, on this beautiful spring, sunny morning here in Watford. And for Pesach, just to say before I start, I've started up a YouTube channel as well, so that you can watch all the videos on YouTube. I'll try and post a link to this on the Facebook page so you can cross-reference and see all the videos in one place. Might make things a little bit easier. Anyway. Talking about Pesach, there's four names or four accolades, if you like, that are applied to Pesach, and I want to go through each one of those and show how the festival is reflected in those four names. Chag HaMatzos, Zman Cherusenu, the time of our freedom. Chag HaPesach, obviously, is the name we give it. And Chag HaAviv, the festival of springtime. So starting with Chag HaMatzos. Chag HaMatzos refers to, obviously, matzahs. It's the name that the festival is given in Torah. It's pretty much the only name that the festival is given in Torah, and refers to the two-dimensional square or round hand-baked matzahs that we, on Pesach, as we all know, we're commanded to eat them on the first day of Pesach. We don't have to eat matzah on the rest of Pesach, but the obligation is on the first day. We're just not allowed to eat chometz throughout, which is leaven, throughout the whole of Pesach. And whereas, if we can compare it to Sukkot very briefly, Sukkot, the Festival of Tabernacles, is all about space. The definition of the Sukkah is defined by its space that it can occupy, the height, the width, the breadth, and how far apart the skach has to be. All of these different things refer to space as a dimension for Sukkot. Pesach is all about time. If you look at the calendar for Pesach, it's all about when we can start eating, can't eat, must burn this by then, search for chumetz then, and eat and do all these sort of things. Oh yeah, most of it's got to do with food, let's face it. But all of the different times are very evident from even just looking at the calendar. And Pesach is almost like a time that we reset time. It's the start in one respect, but Menisan Ha'olam Nidyon. We say in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that the world almost resets and there's some element of recreation of the world, according to one opinion, in Nisan and in Pesach. The difference, the most important aspect of time about Pesach when we talk about Chag HaMatzos, is the difference between chometz and matzah. Is that matzah is chometz? Chometz is matzah that's been left for 18 minutes. It's made anything that's made of any of the 5 grains. So I've got to remember this now. The kids are getting me. Wheat, barley, whey, rye, and spelt. Any of those 5 grains left with a liquid, normally water, for more than 18 minutes, it becomes chometz automatically. So chometz is very much the opposite of matzah, and the only difference between them is this dimension of time. Like I said, matzah is two-dimensional. It occupies the minimum amounts of space. To exclude space, it represents time. And it's interesting that the miracles of the main miracle of Pesach, the plague of the firstborn, which was really what triggered the Exodus, happened at midnight. But if you think about midnight doesn't exist. You've got 11:59, 23:59, which is day 1, and then 00:00 is the start of the next day. So actually, God had to slot in, if you like, create a space in time to create the plague. The next aspect of Pesach is Zman Cherusenu, the time of our freedom. And it's the way we describe it in the Amida, certainly the Musaf Amida. It's the freedom from Egyptian slavery, a freedom for what we call Mibeis Avodim, from the house of slaves, in that the Egyptians themselves were slaves to their lack of free will. The Egyptians worshipped sheep. Their god was a god that flocked. That followed the crowd, that were not individualistic. And we see that in the descriptions of the Egyptians, that there really aren't many that go against the flow, if you like. We very much rebel against that. We sacrificed, the children of Israel had to sacrifice a sheep to show their disregard for that herding mentality. The book of the Torah that describes the whole Exodus story is called Shemos, it's called names. I know this is going to be painful to say it, the way we were denigrated was by giving us numbers. in the past. We aren't numbers, we were names, and one of the merits that the children of Israel are given is that they retained their names, they retained their individuality and their individual identity. And Jews have very much been like that throughout history, going against the grain, not just following the crowd, not following what everyone else thinks, and dare I say it, not following just what the media tells you. The third and fourth names of Pesach, Chag HaPesach, which is the name we give Pesach to describe how God jumped over the doorposts of the children of Israel when they daubed them with the blood of the Paschal sacrifice, and the Chag HaAviv, the festival of springtime. Pesach is always we have a lunar calendar, and so there is an element of slippage there with regards to the solar calendar. But we always lock in Pesach to the springtime, and that sets everything else in sync for the rest of the year. Pesach must be at the time of spring, because spring is a time of starting, of forgetting what's happened up till now. The buds, the seeds are just bursting through with spontaneity. It's the beginning of the barley festival, and whereas wheat it doesn't ripen until sort of 7 or 8 weeks later, until Shavuos time when the wheat festival starts. Barley is the festival. The second day of the festival, we celebrate the beginning of the barley harvest with the bringing of the Omer offering, and that builds up to Shavuos, when, as I say, is the beginning of the wheat harvest. And the comparison is made between wheat and barley. Barley are very much an animal food, representing our animal instincts, our coarser nature, if you like, whereas wheat is a more refined food. We make bread out of it, and really man is the only animal that eats bread, and so wheat is more targeted at a more refined and mature mentality. And that progression from our initial start to our end point is what we celebrate during the Omer period. So it's time of spontaneity, achieving the impossible, big, bright, brash miracles that happened at Pesach. The way I like to think of it is like kids' toys. If you look at older children's toys, like an iPad and stuff like that, they're much more boring and sort of unappealing. Whereas you look at a child's toys, an infant's toys, they're bright colours, they're big, they're plastic, they're very durable, and that's very much like the mitzvahs, the miracles of Pesach. Big, bright, locusts and frogs and hailstones and darkness and all of these sort of great things going on. Big, bold miracles, because we were very much immature when we were in Egypt. And we needed that sort of clear, coarse nature of miracles before we could progress. And you could almost compare those more mature toys, in inverted commas, the more mature miracles, if you like, to the festival we just had at the end of the year, which was Purim, where the miracles there pretty much weren't any miracles. They were very much hidden. It was a time of forgetting what the past was. The children of Israel had to completely reject the idolatry of Egypt, give up on what they were steeped in, what they'd been brought up with for hundreds of years. Like I mentioned about the herding mentality, about the idolatry that they used to use. And Pesach, if I can preach for a moment, and you will forgive me please, it is a great time to give up on an addiction, give up on something that's holding you back. Mitzrayim, the land from which we escaped, is a land that the word means constraints, means things that hold us back, means things that narrow us. Things that prevent us from fulfilling our own real potentials. So Pesach is a great time to start something new. Do some research, ask a rabbi a question, find out, buy a new Haggadah, or learn a new book, find a new book to read about Jewish history, about Jewish culture, about Jewish knowledge, about Jewish festivals, about something. If you're interested in history, there is so much history to learn. The Haggadah itself is steeped in history about the different Rabbonim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, and all of the great Rabbonim in there. Find out about the Greeks and what culture we had to reject there, and how we've incorporated a lot of Greek culture into the Haggadah, into the Seder service itself. It's fascinating. You read the writings of Antiphanes, for example. He writes about the symposia, the Socratic symposia, where they would ask each other questions, philosophical questions, whilst reclining on couches and dipping food. And hey, guess what? They would celebrate by drinking 3 cups of wine. Sound familiar? We're rejecting that by drinking 4. We go above and beyond that. Egyptian culture, my goodness me, what we were walking away from there, there's so much to find out about. It's fascinating to see how many of the customs and minhagim that we have about Pesach are showing us a complete rejection of the idolatrous Egyptian culture and Egyptian practices. For example, did you know that the Egyptians would celebrate their gods by eating bread and beer? Chometz. And how do we celebrate Pesach? By doing the complete opposite, by rejecting those things. I want to talk about two other meanings of the word Pesach. One appears in the first book of Kings, in chapter 18, verse 21. Elijah is talking to the worshippers of Baal. Baal was a tremendously damaging and dangerous cult, idolatrous cult that emerged in his time, and he's talking to them, and here's what he says: "V'yigash Eliyahu el kolam v'yomer ad masai atem poschem al shetei haseipim." How long are you going to poschem? Are you going to dither? And the word Pesach there means dither. Are you going to procrastinate? How long are you going to just sit there, not sure whether you're going to worship idols or worship God? Because don't forget, when we talk about idolatry in the writings, in the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim, they weren't only worshipping idols; they were hedging their bets. They would do everything they could. They'd worship anyone they could, just if it made the rains come. Because being an agricultural society, they were very much dependent on the rain, and they just didn't care. And Elijah was saying to them, "That's not right. You need to stamp your mark on where you're going to follow." But on Pesach we do that. We are dithering. That's what the whole Manish Tana is about. Why we celebrate slavery on the one hand and freedom on the other? We've got symbols on the Seder plate that represent both. It's all a jumble. It's all muddled up. And the truth is, the answer to Manish Tana, the 4 questions, and the reason why we have all of these different symbols in, is God brought us out. We were slaves before midnight, before the plague of the firstborn, but after the plague of the firstborn, we were set free. So we do have that duality. We have that dichotomy on Pesach. And the Seder night is the tipping point between the two. It's the tipping point between freedom and slavery. So that's one meaning of the word Pesach. As I said, most Hebrew words and most Hebrew roots have 4 meanings. Probably know that the two of the others, that Pesach means the entranceways of the doors, and then of course there's the Pesach itself and the Korban Pesach, and Pesach, opening the mouth, or the mouth that speaks. But the final one I want to talk about is Pesach, and Pesach is a strange word. It means someone who's lame, a cripple. And if we look at the disqualifying features of a sacrifice, or an animal that couldn't be brought up if it was a cripple, Pesach is given there, or a Kohen who was lame, couldn't serve in the temple. The cripple in Torah, the famous cripple, is Jacob. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov describes how the 7 ushpizim, the 7 guests that we have at the Seder night, he compares them to 7 beggars, and each one has a physical deformity. And we know that many of the biblical personalities had some sort of handicap. Moses had a speech impediment. Jacob was lame. Isaac, we talk about being blind. Abraham, Reb Nachman says, quotes from Tehillim to say that he was deaf in some ways and couldn't hear properly. That's why a lot of the dialogue that he has with other people seems a bit muddled up. But we celebrate the cripple. We are all descendants from Jacob, the cripple. And my prayer for Yom Tov is that that the cripple, that the idea of being lame can pull us all together, pull all of this together. As we say in Isaiah chapter 35, verse 6, Oz Yadaleg Ke Ayol Piseach, that all being well in Messianic times, the cripple will dance or will skip like a gazelle. And that's what our prayers are for Pesach. Very much a messianic festival, very much looking to the future redemption, when we should all be able to come together and celebrate Pesach properly in Yerushalayim, with the temple, with the proper Korban Pesach. I wish you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a great Yom Tov, an enjoyable and inspired Yom Tov, and I hope it's better than last year's, and I hope it's something that can help you grow, and as I say, change and grow for the better. All the best. Bye-bye.